Alrighty, folks. Thank you for joining us this afternoon as we move into the evening block of our presentations. My name is Jay Pustiolsky-Bennett. I'm the chair of the Fans Association, and it is now my pleasure and privilege to bring you the prolific and internationally affiliated Dr. Stephen Reysen of Texas A&M University, presenting on the sex differences in engagement with anime fans.
Thank you. I don't know if I deserve that much of an introduction. So today I'm going to give a brief report, and because it's a brief report, I'm going to add in some other studies after we talk about this one. So, talking about sex within the anime fandom, it's about 70% male. This is a comparison between a furry convention, which was also predominantly male, and fantasy sport fans, which also are predominantly male. The weird thing is when you go to an anime convention, it's about 50-50. So it's when you add in those online anime fans, that's when you really see the boost in males in the fandom. In terms of some of the sex differences we've noticed within the anime fandom, females are more likely to cosplay than males. Also, females are more likely to crossplay than males are. Females report greater identification with their favorite character. And that's not just unique to anime, that is pretty much other studies of media in terms of identification with favorite characters. You also see that. One of the issues though is for our research, the study, we do it once a year, and it's conducted in English. So we've been trying to get more non-Western fans. So in this study, we had a sample from the Philippines and also undergraduate college students, and also a sample of undergraduate college students from the United States. So the Philippines has, this is I'm not a historian, which is blatantly evident anytime I try to talk about history. So in the Philippines, anime first appeared on television in the 1970s. The president banned it for a short period of time. And then in the 80s and the 90s, it started to grow. And then early 2000s became more popular. They had their first convention. One of the last reports I looked at said that Philippines is in the top 20 nations in terms of distribution rights. In other words, they're consuming anime. And there's also Japan exports a good amount of work to artists in the Philippines. For example, half of One Piece animation is done in the Philippines. So what we did is we measured a degree of identification with the fandom and also engagement. Identification with a group comes from the theory perspective. It's actually two theories put together, social identity theory and self-categorization theory. But the two are, nowadays, we just talk about the social identity perspective, and the two theories are rolled into one. And one of the points that the theory makes is that we belong to various different groups, and we could feel different degrees of connection with each of these different groups. And that degree of connection is what we call identification, or in-group identification, or collective identification. People call it various things. But basically, the more you identify with the group, the more you adhere to the group norms. So if, for example, sport fans, they have norms of perhaps being competitive. So the more you identify as a sport fan, or the more you identify with the team, I don't know, Cheeseheads, I guess that's Green Bay. I'm not a huge sport fan. The more you will act in line with what is normative within that group. And this theory has been taken outside of psychology as well. For example, in business, they do organizational identification, which is basically how their degree of connection with the organization or company. And they find it's a very good predictor of things like how involved you are in your job, your commitment to your job, how satisfied with you are at your job, how well you do in terms of performance, and organizational citizenship behaviors. Those are things like outside of your role within the job, do you go above and beyond helping other people and doing good things for the company? Within fandom, less people have looked at fandom identification. Most people in the psychology, in terms of studying fans, they look at fanship, which I'll talk about in the second half. So for sport fans, fandom identification is related to things like purchasing things with the team symbol on it, wearing like a shirt or a hat and wearing those clothes, recruiting people, giving positive word of mouth about the team. And what most people measure in sport fan research is, do they go to the games and pay money to go to the games? And fandom is a better predictor than what, well, I'll talk about that later. Within the Brony fandom, we found that it's related to things like purchasing fan-made or watching fan-made content and purchasing fan-made products, watching reruns, going to conventions, just like the game attendance, and talking to friends about My Little Pony, just like for the sport fans, talking about their favorite team. So fandom identification is related to a lot of behaviors, whatever. So in the present study, what we did was we got a sample of undergraduate college students from the Philippines and then a sample of undergraduate college students from the U.S. And we gave them measures of identification and engagement. And what we were kind of looking at is, are there sex differences? So For fandom identification, we use the single item social identity scale, which is right there. I strongly identify with other anime fans in the anime community. That's on a 1 to 7 Likert type. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. And then we had 4 items which we used to measure engagement. So watching anime, reading manga, reading various websites like news websites, blogs, and reviews of anime, and talking to other people, friends about anime. And so that's on a scale of 0 to 7. So here were the results of this study. So study 1 was Philippines, study 2 was the US, and there are pretty strong differences between the males and females across all of the measures that we had. And it's in the way that males were more identified with the fandom and engaged more with anime than females in our sample. It wasn't part of what we were going for originally to look at, but if you just eyeball those means, it looks like the Philippines do appear to consume more anime than the US college students. And so this data has, people who are not anime fans at all included in there. It was just people, undergraduate college students. And that's why some of these means are very low. Next, what we did was a mediation model. So when you make the comparison between females and males in the data sets, as you move toward males, that predicts greater anime engagement, watching, reading manga and whatnot. And then what we did is we stick in fandom identification into the model, and we see that the association between the sex of the participant and engagement drops. In other words, fandom can explain some of that association between sex of participant and degree of engagement. And those numbers are pretty much almost identical, which was interesting. In other words, that the same associations are happening for both undergraduate college students in the Philippines and undergraduate college students in the US. Some of the conclusions from this brief report on sex differences in engagement and identification with the fandom. Fandom identification is a great predictor of the degree that you consume or engage with anime. We saw similar results across these 2 different cultural spaces, which to us kind of signals there's some basic mechanism within fandoms that work in both of these cultural spaces. And lastly, dudes like anime. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit about well-being. And this is from the International Anime Research Project. It's an advanced online publication in leisure sciences. If it's behind a paywall, if you email me, I'll send you the paper. And our next study is in August this year, in a couple months. You can sign up on our website to get email updates about the project, and we will email update you when the study goes live. So the last study was about fandom identification, but most of the research in psychology of fans is about, they use fanship. So fanship is your degree of psychological connection with the fan object. So for example, I love anime. Well, fandom is your degree of connection with other people in the community, the other fans. So I love the anime community. Fanship is a way of individual difference type, well, they're both individual difference, but a way of saying Joe Bob is different than Jane in terms of how big of a fan they are. And that's probably the best way of thinking about it, is fanship is a measure of how big of a fan you are of something. Fandom is more of a social identity, coming from this social identity perspective, which you can see, these are examples underneath of how we measure each of these constructs. The sad part is that most of the research in psych is about fanship, and they rarely ever measure fandom, although fandom can be a better predictor of things than fanship, which the study I'll be talking to you about soon is about that. The fandom is a really great measure that people should be including in their research. So if you go to our website, you can download the book for free. We're giving it away as a thank you for everybody who participates in our research. This data I'm showing you now is in there. I just screen grabbed it from there. We have fanship and fandom as predictors, simultaneous predictors of various behaviors and consumption type patterns within anime fandom. And so what that does is it allows us to see what is unique about fanship above and beyond fandom, or what is it about fandom that's unique above and beyond fanship. So fanship is related to things like watching anime, looking at typo. I'll never go back and look at papers you published. Looking at fan art, reading news and reviews, playing anime-related games, reading light novels, reading manga, listening to theme songs, listening to J-pop. One thing I learned in this study that we did of this is anime fans don't really listen to K-pop very much. It's more J-pop. Well, so that's fanship. That's like a personal identity, your connection with the object of interest. And it's related to things about consumption. It's basically more related to consuming the thing that you're a fan of. Fandom is again, the degree you're connected with other fans in the community. And it's related to, for example, the number of cons you go to, the number of meetups, local meetups you go to, reading fan fiction, which is something that is fan-made. And talking basically with other people online and offline, watching anime with friends, talking about anime with friends, posting in forums, and consuming theory crafting and reviews. Again, those tend to be from other fan things. So fanship, we're seeing as the trend being that it's related to consuming or buying the object of fan interest, while fandom is more of the social aspects. It's related to more of the social aspects of the fan community. Here's some other measures that we compared. So we see fanship related to shyness, related to feeling that they act awkward around non-fans, correcting other people's Japanese, obsession, so a measure of how obsessed you are. The identity importance, which is saying being an anime fan is super important to who I am as a person. Feeling jealous when a favorite character is in a relationship with another character in their favorite anime. Feeling jealous if a voice actor is in a real life relationship with somebody else. The negatively related to believing they can control their anime fan identity. Biological essentialism is the idea that they were born an anime fan, and it would be very difficult to change from being an anime fan to a non-anime fan, and feeling personally stigmatized. So fanship, what we're also seeing, not only is it about consumption of the object, it also tends to be related to some negative things like obsession. Fandom, related to the number of anime friends you have, the number of face-to-face friendships that you have, the seeking harmony in discussions with other people, and feeling good about being the anime fandom as a whole. So private self-esteem, public self-esteem, and willingness to tell other people that you're an anime fan. Again, these are all tend to be social aspects of being a fan. So Daniel Wan, who is the biggest name in psychology if you're talking about fans, he studies sport fans, and he noticed over time that fanship, his measure of how much you love whatever the team is, which he calls sport team identification, but it's fanship, he consistently saw that it's related to a positive well-being. And he put out this model saying that the reason that we see an association between fanship and well-being is because of making friends and enduring social connections with other people. He tested this model 3 different times and could not find any empirical evidence to support it. We took his model and went to an anime convention. And so here's what we found is that fanship has a small, but it is a significant relationship with well-being. And we not only tested face-to-face friendships, we also looked at how many online friendships people had. And it was the face-to-face friendships that predicted well-being, not online friendships. This was a different study where we had a sample of fans in general. And fandom, now this is not fanship, so fandom, how connected you are with other fans in your community, in the fan community, predicted well-being, and it predicted it through social connections, not through feeling like you had a purpose in life or escapism. So down to the heart of what this paper was about, we wanted to show two things. One, we predicted that fandom would be a better predictor of well-being than fanship. And we wanted to look at what mediated the relationship between fandom and well-being. Study one, we had undergraduate college students, and they could be fans of anything. So they wrote what they were a fan of and then completed the measure. Study two was furries, and study three were anime fans. And what we found is fandom was a better predictor of psychological well-being. And those on the left are the different dimensions of psychological well-being as proposed by Riff. So Riff average is an average of those 6 dimensions, which are feeling like you have autonomy in life, feeling like you have mastery over your environment, feeling like you have grown personally, so personal growth, feeling like you have positive relationships with other people, feeling like you have a purpose in life, and feeling as though you are accepted by other people. So fandom showed pretty strong positive correlate or associations with those different dimensions for the most part, whereas fanship did not have very many significant associations. In other words, fandom is a better predictor of well-being than fanship. Next, we looked at the mediators for the relationship between fandom and well-being. And so study one, we didn't measure because it wouldn't make sense, because the undergraduate college students could be a fan of a celebrity, or they could be a fan of this study was conducted in Texas, so the Dallas Cowboys. They could be a fan of opera music. So we weren't able to do an exact measure. So what we did is we had a measure of contacts. So how many other people do you know that are also fans of this thing? So fandom predicted more contacts. In other words, more people around the participant also liked or were a fan of the thing, which then predicted well-being. And in the furry fandom and the anime fandom, what we did was we had a measure of how many events, like local meetups to watch anime, or furry meetups, going to cons, things like that, online type activities like reading and posting and message boards and forums like Reddit, and then consumption. How much do you consume furry media or consume anime related media? And for both furries and anime fans, it was the events. Again, it's the in-person connections, social connections that people were making that predicted well-being. And so across these different studies, we're starting to see a pattern that fandom is a better predictor of well-being for fans. And the reason for that is because of the social connections that fans make. So actually, y'all right now at an anime convention are like peak well-being at the moment. And we've measured that. So Daniel Wan did a study like that where he measured sport fans at the game. And then he went and measured them later at their house watching sport. And he found they were happier at the game than they were at home watching. And we did it with anime fans. Anime fans who completed the study at the con reported higher well-being than anime fans who completed the study online. And it's because you're in an environment where you're meeting new people and seeing old friends. Again, social connections. So conclusions, fandom is a better predictor of well-being than fanship. Daniel Wan should go back and look at his model again, and instead of having team identification, he should stick in fandom probably. And the reason for this is through face-to-face interactions, not necessarily online, although during the pandemic, you could only do online. And we saw similar results across general undergraduate college students who could have been fans of anything. And we saw it in the furry fandom, and we saw it in anime fandom. So there's probably some underlying psychological mechanisms, such as friendships and maintaining social connections, that is common to fans in general, not necessarily these specific fandoms that we looked at. Thank you.
Right, now we have a few minutes available for audience questions. Yes, over there, please.
So that was an interesting study. What I did notice though, and what really stood out to me was that when we measured the general undergraduate
I'm gonna jack this up.
and anime fans, the general population still had a higher, pretty much almost across the board metric readout for just general well-being. Did you guys look into maybe what the discrepancy or what might have caused that discrepancy? Did you plan to look into what caused that discrepancy?
She's asking about the discrepancies between general fan questions and anime fans in terms of sense of well-being.
Yes, so for the general, so when I say general fan, it was undergraduate college students, and the study would say, what are you, they basically say, people are fans of different things. What's your number one favorite thing you're a fan of? And then they would rate, like, for example, I strongly identify with this fan interest. Whereas for anime fans, it would be, I strongly identify as an anime fan. Does that make sense? So I don't know if it would affect the data too much, because we see the same pattern